come speak at your church and speak to your family. So my husband's here, my mom is here as well, my friend Tanya. So as you may have noticed on social media, on Instagram, there's a hashtag that's been circling around the past couple of years. It's called Representation Matters. And so if you haven't heard this phrase, it's essentially just a call and an urge to our culture, largely American culture, for people of color and women to be represented in power and places of influence. And so this is so important to know in our church because a lot of times representation is not seen from women. Women are not leading churches in the capacity that we're capable of, that we're able to do. And so when I think of that, I think of the story of Esther. And so if you have your Bibles with you, you can turn with me to Esther. And I grew up in an area where people, looked like me. I wasn't aware of just how much people would look at me differently because I'm a woman of color. I had no idea because where I was from, I was championed, I was supported, I was encouraged. I'm Blaxican, I'm Afro-Latina, so I understood, from both sides of the spectrum. And so with me, I had no idea until I became a teacher. And I started reading my kids' textbooks, and I started saying, that's not really what happened here. And so when I started teaching, I started telling kids history from my perspective, my heritage, my ancestry. And I'm very honest with my kids. I let them know, I'm Blaxican. And the moment I really realized that representation mattered was when one of my little girl's hands shot up, and she said, "Miss Crystal, me too. I'm Blaxican too." And I stopped and I thought, I actually never had a teacher of color in elementary school. And how much would it have meant to me to have this woman who shares my heritage speaking from a perspective I connect with? And it just brought the phrase full circle to me. And I understood from a different point of view how powerful it is to simply have somebody preaching from a perspective that you get, you understand, and it's not just something for women to speak at women's things or on Mother's Day or to the children. It's for everybody, it's for everyone. And we're going to see that through the story and the life of Esther as we go through. The first point is representation is unexpected. Okay, representation comes unexpectedly. So the backstory to Esther, her origin story, is that she is an orphan, and she's raised by her cousin Mordecai. And what's interesting about that is she later becomes queen of the Persian Empire, but she doesn't have a royal name. She doesn't come from a wealthy family. She's an orphan. She has no mother, no father, and this time that would leave her very vulnerable. And the fact that she was raised by a family member and not her parents leaves her out in the margins. It leaves her on the fringes of society. And what's interesting about Esther's story, though, is that her story is a lot like David's story. It's a lot like Joseph's story. It's a lot like Daniel's story, to where we have somebody who's from the margins of society, a shepherd in the field, a betrayed brother, Daniel left in the lion's den, who later becomes a person of influence, a person in power, a person in leadership. However, when it comes to Esther's story, we focus on the crown. We focus on her submitting. We focus on her humility. No, don't get confused. Esther was representing. She was representing women. She was representing the Jewish culture and people. And what she did was no small task. It's a lot like David. We give him a big repertoire. We focus on the fact that he became king. We focus on the fact that he changed his nation, that he stood for the Lord, that he was the same man of integrity when he was a little boy watching the sheep that he was when he became king. However, when it comes to Esther, all we can say is that she got him because she had a pretty face, and she was the queen who found a way to finesse her words in such a way that would sway the king. No, not at all. Let's turn to chapter 2 of Esther, verse 7. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up, that's Esther, because she had neither father nor mother. This young woman, who was also known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. So right there we see a lot of preachers will stop right there, right? And they'll say, well, she was a very beautiful person. And later on we read all the beauty treatment she had to go through to become queen, to be selected, to get noticed. But that was not the reason why she became queen. No, she became queen because she had the Lord's favor. She became queen because she was purposed. She had the calling of the Lord on her life, and she was marked. She was destined. She was not just a pretty face. She was not a token. She was a powerful woman with integrity who was a bringer of justice. And that was unexpected. That was unexpected because this was a Persian regime, and she was a Jewish woman. And she was racially ambiguous, and she was able to get to the throne, but it was an undercover mission that she got there because of her beauty. It was an undercover mission that the Lord had. It wasn't the only thing that qualified her. So let's not stop there. Let's not stop at the fact that she was beautiful. She was strong. She was brilliant. She was intelligent. And it's all over the pages in the book that marks her story. And what's interesting is, even now when it comes to women in ministry, we like to focus on how a woman presents herself. Women are more criticized than their male counterparts in this field because we're not used to this. We're not used to seeing women lead in churches with strength and dignity. We're not used to this. But the Lord has an unexpected agenda when it comes to raising up women and encouraging us. And it's so beautiful. I find the feminine heart of the Lord so beautiful because surely he must have some type of maternal traits in order to create mothers, in order to raise children through mothers. When you think about the beauty of a mother, the beauty and strength that has to come when you become a mother, I can't even fathom it. I'm not ready. But but there's a reason why. There's a reason why it should scare me, because you're responsible for a life. You're responsible for fostering that life with nurturing and care. And so because of all of this, we know that the Lord must have a reason and a purpose for women beyond our pretty faces, beyond a look. And I feel so often we want women to know that we're beautiful. We want to encourage that. And that's all well and good. But my mama raised me telling me, you're smart, Crystal. You're intelligent, Crystal. Look at that 100% you got on that spelling test, baby. You are smart. And that's what got me to where I am and willing to step out in God's calling in my life. It's not that she kept telling me that I was pretty, which she did. It was because she told me that I was smart. And if we could look at the story of Esther from that lens, that she became queen not on her looks, but on the favor of the Lord, because it could have been anyone else, but it wasn't. It wasn't anyone else who was chosen to be queen. It was her, because she had a purpose. She had a calling. So what is your purpose and calling? Do you think that it'll come on what society might judge you on? Do you think that it might come on an outer appearance? No. It's going to come through the Lord's favor. It's going to come on the purpose and the calling that he has for your life. God saved a place for her in the palace. He saved a place for her. He called her out to speak on behalf of her people. See, the king had a little henchman whispering in his ear, Haman, who was a hater, and he continued to say, you know what, those Jews, you don't want them. You don't want them. He was intimidated by Mordecai. Mordecai was a Jewish man, and he worked for the king, and he wanted to do everything in his power to get Mordecai out of the picture. And if that meant taking out him and the people he represented, that's what it meant. And so Haman whispered to the king, and he kept on pushing for it. And the Lord knew this plot was brewing, and he didn't send Mordecai to be the one to speak up for the Jewish people. He sent Esther. He sent Esther because that was her calling, not because Mordecai wasn't qualified, but because Esther had something to say, because Esther had something to do, and it was going to be like no one else could do it. However, anybody else could have. It wasn't Esther's responsibility. It didn't fall on her. God would bring salvation to the Jews using anyone, but she was brave. She stepped up to the plate. She spoke out. She didn't cower back. What does that say of her? That she had courage, that she was a woman to be reckoned with, that she knew the struggle. She was an orphan, let's not forget. Sometimes we think about the things we have in our past that make us feel less qualified, but no, actually, those are the things that make you stronger. Those are the things that help you to see things from a different perspective, to watch out from different angles that somebody who was raised with a silver spoon in their mouth might not get. They might not understand certain things that you already know. Sometimes people look down on me and tell me, well, sit down, just listen to the older folks. Oh, you don't know my story. You have no idea what I've seen, what I've done, what I've had to lose in my young life. I identify with Esther's story. Her representation is powerful in my life. I read this book start to finish in high school, the first book of the Bible that I was fully engaged in, because she was an orphan. By the age of 16, I had lost two parents. Two parents. I was raised by three, I like to say. My mom, I had my dad, and her sister, my Nina. And my Nina actually got cancer when I was 15, and she didn't win that battle. But she's with the Lord. And not a year later, my father committed suicide. And so anybody could look at that story and go, oh, she's out for the count. Look at statistics on women like me. Where should I be right now? But where did the Lord purpose me to be? And where does he have women like me? Where does he have us purposed? He doesn't have us purposed to match statistics. He has us purposed for destiny. He has us purposed to change the world. He has us purposed to be change makers in our communities. That's what he has for women like me. And so when I tell people that part of my story, they kind of step back a little bit and assume certain things that I might have done out of grief. Certain actions I might have taken because I look a certain way. When I tell people things I've done, such as being ASB president in high school, or different accomplishments and accolades, people sometimes look at me like, oh, wow. No, not oh, wow. You don't know my purpose. You don't know my calling. You don't know my story. You don't know what the Lord has for me, just based on how I look. And so when we look at Esther, her story may have been unexpected, but that doesn't mean that it was never destined. It was always meant to happen the way it did. It was always meant. She was never meant to just stay in her hometown struggling. The Lord had a purpose for her, and she stepped up to the plate. She partnered with him. And so when we hear this story, we have to know, we have to partner with the Lord. She wasn't the Savior. She was God's partner. She worked with him. She trusted him. Representation inspires us all. It moves us all. I find it very interesting that God is not mentioned once in the book of Esther. He's not explicitly, it doesn't say God in Esther. but we know who she's living for. We know what she's destined to do. We know what drives her. It's her love for the Lord and the love for her people. And those two things together are a force to be reckoned with. They are a force to be reckoned with, because those two things, when we fight for the Lord's cause and we see the needs of people like us, we move mountains way out of the way. We believe for big things. We have great faith. We have big dreams. And so for me, when I see other women representing their communities, I get inspired. When I see certain women who may be East Asian or whatever their ethnicity may be that's not like mine, and I see them out there thriving, I mean, I'm just like, dude, yes, get it, girl. Do what you need to do. Let them know. Because if she can do it, I can do it. Right? So even when we look at this and say, I'm not Jewish, I don't know anything about this. Yeah, but how many of us understand what it's like to come from an ancestry of oppressed people and rise? And we see this story and we say, if Esther could do that, if she could be put in a position of influence and speak up, then surely I can. Representation inspires us all. Inspires us all. When I had that little girl in my classroom who's Blaxican raise her hand and say, "Me too, Miss Crystal," I was convicted. I was convicted to do as much as I could to rewrite that textbook, that history textbook. I was convicted to never let a story that mattered go untold in my classroom. They're third graders, but they're watching, they're listening, they're aware, and they know. They know. And so I made it my personal mission that, like Esther in the throne room, that I would be my own kind of Esther in the staff meetings. That I would be speaking up on behalf of these girls and these children of color. Because although the demographic of the school is a lot of students of color, the leadership is not. The leadership is not. And so I grew up thinking, I'm not a minority. Look at my community. There's a lot of us. That's not the thing, though. The thing is, who's in the power seat? Who's making the decisions? I showed my kids the campaign ad for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I wanted them to see, look, her parents worked to get where they are today. She rides the bus to work in New York City. And if she can do it, you can do it. If she can really be a representative, a true representative in Congress, I can too. You can too. It's not too hard. It's only as hard as we allow ourselves to make it. But when one person steps up, we're all able to have the courage to step up. And when I read Esther's story when I was in high school, I knew, you know what? If she could do it, I could do it. And that's the power of representation. That's why it's so important for women to be ministering in spaces and being able to speak and advocate. Because sometimes the guys may think something's cool, but then we're going, I don't think I would like that very much at our conference. You know, I don't think that message really applies to me. I grew up looking up to great preachers that were male, but the connection could only go so far. To the point where I thought I was crazy. Like, is it bad that I think that thing that you said in the message wasn't really like the best thing to say? No, it's not bad. It's just he's different from me. He's a male, I'm a female. I have a different perspective, a different experience. People approach me differently. I don't get automatic respect in certain rooms. I have to assert myself in certain spaces. And when we have women preaching, we're able to say, you know what? I need to show more respect. I really need to check myself. I think it says something for us all. So we look in Esther, and we see the part in chapter 4 where Mordecai starts speaking up, and he starts trying to convince his cousin, look, this is an important mission that God is sending you on, and you don't want to miss out on this opportunity. In verse 14, chapter 4, it says, "For if you remain silent at this time, Relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." It's a very, very well-known phrase from Esther's story, for such a time as this. If you step up now, who could you bring salvation to? Is what Mordecai is saying. The clock is ticking. Haman's plotting. He's scheming. What are you going to do? Because you have a position of influence now, Esther. Now the conviction is turned around on you, and you can't wait for somebody else to save you. You're the hero in this story, girl. You're the one that's going to speak up. And so the power of that phrase, for such a time as this, is it provides us with a sense of urgency. It provides us with a sense of knowledge that the clock is ticking. You know, we have to be the ones to represent. And so when I tell people that I want a church plant soon, some people are very excited and others are you sure? Do you know what pastoring really is? And I have to say, I honestly don't know firsthand what it's like to start a church. But I'm sure Esther didn't know what it was going to be like for her if she spoke up. But she knew she needed to for such a time as this. I love the fact that I'm Blaxican and I'm from Los Angeles. I just feel like it mirrors my culture and my city so well. You know, that we can come together, that we can live in peace. And I was born right after the riots. And I don't know, there's just something about it that I love. I think it's so powerful that I was born in such a time as this. So what is it for you? What is it for you that you think, I was born in such a time as this? If I was born in any other decade, I wouldn't be able to do the things that I'm able to do now for the Lord. There's no, you were born at the wrong time, wrong place. No, you were born exactly when you needed to, exactly where you needed to, for a purpose and for a reason. And because representation inspires us all, I think it's important that we understand that what we're representing as women in ministry, we're not representing a position, a title, an action. I'm not so concerned with people knowing what God has called me to do, but who He's called me to be. Not what am I doing, who am I becoming? Because I don't want to have a church where people are so concerned with doing. I want to have a church where people are concerned with who they're becoming in Christ. Because you can take away my pulpit, you can take away my position, you can take away whatever you want, but you cannot take away the fact that I am a woman of God. You cannot take away the fact that I love the word of the Lord. You cannot take away the fact that I have my story that I have, that I'm representing the people that I'm representing. You can't take certain things away from people when they know who they are. Esther knew who she was. She knew who she was. And that's why she didn't waver. She may have hesitated, but she didn't waver. Because the same girl who was in her hometown as an orphan was the same woman who was on the throne beside the king, who stepped out boldly. It's important that we understand that women in ministry is not just meant to inspire little girls who feel called to be pastors, leaders, preachers. Being a woman in ministry, I should hope, would inspire young men. You know, I wouldn't be doing my job if God called me to be a pastor if I only appealed to the women, if I only appealed to the ladies. You know, the word of the Lord isn't gender specific. If this word is not reaching the people that it's supposed to be reaching, well, I might as well just start an all-women's church. I once had a parent come up to me at back to school night, and he said, I don't know what it is, but my son just doesn't respect women in authority. And I wanted to say, you just told me everything I need to know about your marriage. But obviously I didn't. I said, okay, well, you can help me by teaching your son about women role models in the world, women who are changing the world. And he kind of just stepped back a little bit. And I've heard the things that come out of this little boy's mouth is just very sexist at 8 years old. And I knew the kind of student he was going to be, so I set him straight real quick. And I let him know, you may have disrespected your second grade teacher, your first grade teacher, your kindergarten teacher, but here's what you're not going to do with your third grade teacher. And so it just stopped with me. And the next day, I kid you not, he runs up to me and he calls me something. And I thought he said, Mama. It's not uncommon for teachers to call for kids to call their teachers mom on accident. I said, baby, did you say mama? And he said, no, I said papa. And I was like, that's great. I posted about it on Instagram, and my friend replied to the story and said, there's a new papa now. And so the point of the story is to just let you know, a representation should inspire us all. You know, I should hope that this little boy would understand that he doesn't just have a teacher that will teach girls how to be, you know, educators or leaders, that he would understand he needs to show respect to women. He needs to understand that he can glean from me as well, not just what the lessons that I teach, but maybe the stories that I share. It's important. It's so important, because not only should we be raising young men to respect women, we should be raising young men to understand they can follow women too. You know, we can all follow here. And so with that said, later on, King Xerxes in chapter 8, he's approached by Esther. And Esther says, you know, I have something that I need from you. And he says an incredible thing. He says, whatever you wish, you can have. And so after conversation, she speaks up on behalf of the Jews. And she says, you know, this shouldn't happen. What Haman is plotting, it can't go down. And so he proceeds to tell her, well, let me just write it down and seal it, because what's written down and sealed cannot be changed or revoked. Let me just make sure that when I say no to Haman, that it's in writing. What the Lord has done is he's canceled the assignment of the enemy, but he sealed it. He said that old agenda the enemy had for your life, the statistics you were supposed to match up to, it's canceled, and your new story is written, and it's sealed. So you may think you can step out of line or move to the left or to the right, but I will always call you back with my love. I will always bring you back to your true purpose, your true destiny. And that's the power of this story, is not just that the Jews were sealed, but that they were saved, but their salvation was sealed. It couldn't be revoked or changed. It was in writing. It was stamped. It was sent. It was delivered. Their deliverance was final under King Xerxes, in a time where things were looking really dicey. The last point of the morning is representation takes sacrifice. Everybody knows the phrase from Esther, if you grew up in church for such a time as this. But what we don't like to focus on is the next verse in chapter 4, verse 15. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, "Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." Esther counted the cost. She knew how risky it was going to be to approach the king, let alone ask for a royal order to be canceled, a genocide of a people to be removed from the agenda of the royalty. Like, that is insane. Like, to be approached and not invited by the king is one thing that could get you in trouble. But to go against an order that's in process, as a woman, that takes so much bravery and so much strength. And let's not get confused and think she just did it on a whim. No, she sat back and she understood. I could lose my life. When I stick my neck out for my people, I could get it cut off. Like, I'm in serious risk right now. But what's important is she counted the cost. She knew the risk. But that's what faith is. She had radical faith. She said, if I perish, I perish. Because at the end of the day, it's not even about me. It's about justice. It's about the truth being spoken. It's about the word of the Lord being fulfilled. So if I lose my life, it's worth it. And I know that this is costly, but I need to do it. God has called me, and if he doesn't use me, he's going to use someone else, but I want to play a part in this story. And what's reminiscent, this phrase is reminiscent of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he says, Lord, if there's anything else, take this cup from me, but not what I want, what you want, Lord. Jesus didn't just represent heaven on earth. He represented humanity to divinity. He represented a working class family. He represented you, he represented me, and he knew the cost of his sacrifice. He knew that this representation came with a price. But he did it anyway. He did it all for love, and Esther did the same. And I hope that the takeaway from this morning is that this parallel between Esther's sacrifice and the Lord's sacrifice would become clear, that it would become more in focus, just like how we see King David, just like how we see Daniel, just like how we see Joseph's life mirroring Christ. Because Jesus is on every page of the Bible. And Esther is no exception. No women's story in the Bible is any exception. Just because she's a woman does not mean that she can't reflect Christ. Because if that's what that means, then that means that I can't reflect Christ. That means that my story can't be a testimony to the Lord. And I know for sure that my story is a testimony to the Lord's faithfulness. Because otherwise I wouldn't be doing what the Lord has asked me to do with my life. And so, at the very least, if we can't say that we represent a people group, if we can't say that we represent women when we step out into our workplaces Monday to Friday, or our families, whatever it may be, we can say we represent Christ. We can say that in this place, I reflect Jesus. In this place, I speak on behalf of the Lord. In this place, I am an example. Because I know that it's possible, because Esther did it. I know that it's possible to live with faith because Queen Esther did it. I pray that she becomes more of a prominent hero figure in the Bible to us. That we don't just walk away from her story thinking it was just a sweet woman who had nice words strung together to convince the king, but that we would see her as a woman who had integrity, who spoke on behalf of the Lord, and who was favored and called by the Lord, that she had a fantastic purpose. And what she did cannot be minimized, because through her lineage comes Jesus. From her people comes Jesus. And she spoke up. She represented. And it definitely matters. Yes, it was unexpected. Yes, it can inspire us all, but it definitely takes sacrifice. Representation definitely takes sacrifice. I see it because I understand the scrutiny that I come under as a teacher for saying certain things to my kids and teaching them true history. I see it through Representative Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and how heavily scrutinized she is for every action she makes. So when one person steps out and goes where nobody else has before, whether it's a woman or ethnicity, heritage, it takes sacrifice. It comes with a cost. Because when you're the first, that's hard. That's so hard. But it leaves a legacy. What's interesting is my father was a Black Panther. And growing up, I would just be like, Dad, can you just stop Like, can you just stop telling your stories? Oh my gosh. But now that he's gone, I really see that everything he taught me is so ingrained. And he left a legacy. And because of the stories he told that I was tired of, I'm able to make a change in my world. I'm able to speak up for myself and for my people. And that speaks volumes, because then it gets passed on to the next person. And that's what happened with Esther's story. When she represented, she was able to speak to a 15-year-old girl in 2011, sitting on her couch, reading her story, because she represented. And it mattered. And it meant something to me. As a woman and as a woman of color, it meant something to me. To go back and say, wow, she wasn't just a queen. She was a representative. And that is the most powerful thing. And when we see that, we see the sacrifice that she made. When we see the sacrifice that she made, we're able to see a better picture of the sacrifice that Jesus made for us. That he counted the cost. He had the faith. He had the obedience. And because of that, we have reconciliation with the Lord. And so I pray this morning that we would be able to remember that we would be able to remember that the Lord's work in Esther's life was powerful. And that it wasn't that she was just a pretty face and that's how she got to where she got to be, but that she was a woman of integrity. She was a woman of power and justice. And because of that, we can be inspired to do the same. Thank you.